Rosemary, you just got back from Fully Charged Live in Australia, in Sydney, in the big city. How did that go?
I think there were like 15,000 people-ish there. And yeah, the live sessions were mostly packed with all seats filled and a few rows deep of standing people for most of the sessions that I did. And it was the first time that I got a chance to, meet a lot of the viewers of YouTube channel. And it's funny because, like YouTube attracts quite introverted people, I think, because you just, like I just sit in my office and make videos on my smartphone. And I was a bit surprised that, that can lead to people interested enough to, stand in line and wait to talk to me. I enjoyed the show and I'm looking forward to next year. They've already announced that they're coming back next year.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, just like the Fully Charged Live event, it was packed full of people. This week's Uptime is packed full of news. And a couple of different things here. And we're getting a lot of requests to do more news from the European Union. So we have. Today's your day. And some of those top items are Denmark is being stopped by the EU on about 30 wind farms because it's possibly violated some EU law. So it's putting Denmark offshore wind on hold for the moment. And in the UK, there's a lot of concerns about funding and investment for a number of offshore wind projects and onshore solar projects because the economy is just a little bit in chaos and there's too many forces at play at the moment. And meanwhile, the United States, because this has to do with the EU, the clean energy czar in the United States is sort of telling off the EU. And I'm not sure that's a good idea because I thought we were all partners in this.
And then we're going to talk about maybe a consequence of IRA, which is Siemens Gamesa Wind Farm opening or, coming out from its mothballing in the US and at the same time closing one in Brazil. And then we're going to talk about a leading edge protection solution, which is just finished a big rollout on a wind farm in Europe.
And we take a look down in New Mexico where Arcosa has announced a $750 million order for towers down in the southwest of the United States. And then we also take a quick look back at DroneBase, which is now Zeitview, and the $55 million they received in funding. Our wind farm of the week, you have to listen to the end of the program and hear it, but it's based in South Dakota. So if you're in South Dakota listening, make sure you listen because you may be the wind farm of the week. I'm Alan Hall, president of WeatherGuard Lightning Tech, and I'm here with Australian blade guru, Rosemary Barnes, and this is the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast. Rosemary, over in the EU, there's a lot of going back and forth in regards to new wind energy projects, offshore in particular. That's where the activity is at the moment. And Denmark's gotten caught up into some new EU rule. And Denmark holds what they call open door projects. And that's a little bit different than here in the United States and probably Australia, where if you have an idea for a project, you propose it to the government. If they say it looks good, you're allowed to go do it. Which is a lot different than the States where it's more top down, not bottom up. But that has run afoul of the EU, and the Danish Energy Agency is putting a number of projects on hold. There were 33 in the queue. There's 2 being allowed to process through at the moment. But the Ministry of Climate, Energy, and Utilities is digging into a number of these projects, and essentially everything else is on hold. Now, this has upset all kinds of groups in Europe. Wind Europe has replied to what the EU has done and what Denmark is allowing them to do in saying, quote, "This decision is completely absurd, especially at a time when the EU is determined to facilitate rather than obstruct the build-out of renewables, and is seeking a more flexible approach to what governments can and cannot do to support this. The current Danish approach to offshore wind is perfectly workable and delivers exactly what citizens and companies all over Europe urgently need: more renewable electricity at low cost. Now, I think that's a pretty reasonable statement, but they're certainly calling out the EU for stopping a number of offshore projects, which are primarily to help Denmark and maybe the surrounding countries. It's a little insane. So the other piece of this is that while all this is going on in Denmark, the EU just approved 2 billion euros in state aid for France, from France in terms of French offshore wind efforts. So they've given France the thumbs up, and they told Denmark to put the brakes on. Is this typical EU behavior at the moment, or what?
I think it's a little bit typical. I mean, it's basically like, yeah, Denmark's gotten too good at offshore wind, and it's not fair to everybody else who needs a chance to catch up. That's the kind of the vibe that I get from it. Maybe not like, a technical legal interpretation, but certainly that's a vibe it's giving off. And I mean, if Europe was the whole world, then maybe that would be fair enough. That's kind of how Europe likes to, organize things based on fairness and every member country getting a fair go. But Europe isn't the whole world. There's other countries, outside of the EU that Europe is competing with as well for resources. So it's like, okay, so Europe wants heaps of green energy installed. Denmark has got a huge chunk of the projects that are, most ready to deliver that. And Europe's like, no, we have to wait for other countries who are less good to, to get in. Like all the, wind turbines and the rest of the supply chain is just kind of going to wait around for that to happen. It's a bit disruptive for the industry in Europe, and other countries around the world will be thrilled to be able to get, to take up that slack that's going to be there now. So I do think it's a little bit of a, insular sort of perspective, not considering the broader perspective of, one, Europe within the world, but two, this problem of climate change and also energy independence. It really seems like Europe's going to get perverse outcomes that are probably not worth that. Like, it is nice if everybody gets good at building offshore wind farms, but it's surely not as important as the fact that they get built at all. So yeah, I'm pretty surprised and disappointed in this decision.
It's just a very odd thing to pop up. In fact, when the news first broke on this, the news articles were very descriptive as to what the EU law was. But it sounds like it's just trying to balance out where projects are going to be taken up at. And if I'm Denmark and I have 33 projects in the queue, I assume some of those projects are going to feed the rest of Europe. Right. And that would make sense to me that there's a huge amount of energy there that Denmark can't use all of that. So they're going to ship some of that up to Sweden and Norway and maybe down south to the UK. Sure, that makes a great sense. But the EU is really putting the brakes on that. And because it'd be an imbalance, an imbalance of power in the electricity market. That doesn't make any sense. But that is not unusual. Because there's a lot of other things happening in the EU area, I mean, particularly in the UK. So there are 5 trade groups in the UK that are asking the government for a clear government plan to deliver green energy. And the UK is kind of in a pinch because they're not part of the EU, obviously, and they're not supremely tied or directly tied to the US. So they're their own island, literally speaking here, in terms of renewable energy. And they're having a difficult time because they're going to have a lot of investments locally to get some of these projects off the ground. And there's the excess, the taxation for excess profits that are happening in the UK at the moment. So the money's being pulled out of these companies when they're trying to invest in the UK. And plus there's inflation, and plus there's supply chain issues. UK is really caught in the middle of a number of tsunamis, and the industry is saying, hey, we need to figure out a path to put offshore wind in. Is there a current path? Are there just so many different problems they're facing? Is it going to be possible to do anything big in the UK over the next 5 years?
I mean, there is a lot of big stuff planned in the UK, so I'm sure stuff will happen, but it's just being made harder. And again, it just does seem kind of needless. I think it's really weird how some countries are dealing with this, energy price crisis, where you've got an electricity market set up, and I mean, the whole point of having a market is that you have variations in price when supply and demand are mismatched, and when demand is higher than supply, prices go up, and then that gives a signal to people, hey, this is an attractive thing to invest in. So, you bring on more investment, prices go down, and, if you ever listen to, a finance person talk about this, they will always say the solution to high prices is high prices. But it's like as soon as, and the other side of that is that there's also a signal to people to reduce demand to the extent that they can, because, it's very expensive, so you should use less. And in the case of energy, that should mean that people are really strongly incentivized to start insulating their houses properly and, setting their thermostats at a, reasonable setting, and all those sorts of really easy things that that can be done to reduce electricity consumption that you don't bother to do when electricity is really cheap. So that's the way that you would, expect that the market would deal with a situation like this. And it's that kind of event. It's kind of the point of why you would bother having a market at all, right? It would be so that, those sorts of rational signals are sent, and, it drives investment in the right places. And makes everything work efficiently. But what you see, not just in the UK, but in lots of places around the world, as soon as electricity prices get high, because that, is something that everybody notices, every voter notices, then they start interfering and, putting price caps so that there is no longer any incentive to insulate your home or whatever. And so, that means that there's no chance to respond in a way that would make it easier next time this happens. And then, also this idea of a super profit kind of tax, or, some way to claw back additional revenue from energy assets, which, it definitely makes some sort of sense with the fossil fuels that we're trying to get off, but it's crazy counterproductive for doing that to renewables companies that had, banked on the good times, providing them with enough revenue to then go and invest that in more renewable energy assets, which everybody agrees that we need more of, but you only end up with the downsides of an electricity market and not the upsides if you don't, let it do its thing. And I just feel like if you want an electricity market, then this kind of situation is very easily foreseeable and would have been foreseen when they were setting up the market. It's not like it was, we never knew prices would go up, so we didn't design the market to account for that. So it's just that, people don't hold their nerve when it comes to, the actual event playing out. You're better off just having your old school, old fashioned central command and control electricity market. Electricity system. If you're not going to let the market do its thing, then your government is going to, politicians going to step in a crisis and decide that they know how best to manage it going forward, despite not being involved in the market at any other time. Why not just have a big government bureaucracy set up to decide what wind farms to build and where and what to charge? That's we can go back to those days if you're not going to let the market do its thing when it needs to the most.
Yeah, that's one of the pushes also from some of these industry leaders over in the UK are saying the projects getting approved by the government are taking way too long to happen, that there's not enough investment money, and that the IRA bill in the United States is basically pulling money to the United States and away from Europe, and particularly away from the UK. So if you're going to have money in a project, where you're going to do it at, it's probably more advantageous to actually do the project in the United States than the UK. So they're in a weird space at the moment.
Get the latest on wind industry news, business, and technology sent straight to you every week. Sign up for the Uptime Tech newsletter at weatherguardwind.com/news.
Well, the United States is not going to play along with Europe, clearly, and obviously the UK is having a lot of issues trying to find a market and investment in renewable energy. In the meanwhile, obviously the United States passed the IRA bill, which is going to pump about $400 million into the industry. Well, that has a real effect on the rest of the green energy economy because it's such a pulling force into the United States. Other countries just can't keep up with that. And in the United States, the focal point for the administration's clean energy effort is John Podesta. And he, in a recent article, he said the U.S. will make no apologies for prioritizing American jobs from the IRA bill. And that he argued that the European allies, the UK, who have pushed against the IRA bill should welcome U.S. leadership. Yeah, this guy's a zinger. I don't know if you follow John Podesta. And obviously people have different opinions about him, but there's one thing about him. He's not subtle, okay? Quote, we make no apologies for the fact that American taxpayer dollars ought to go to American investments and American jobs, Podesta said, calling on Europe to take responsibility for developing its own clean energy sector. Well, Europe has developed its own clean energy sector. It's the United States that's behind. A little perspective here, right?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit delusional to try and pretend that Europe is jealous of America being clean energy leaders. I mean, they're only 20-ish years too late to become that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine if you want to say we're going to, invest so much money that every company only wants to do US projects. It's a bit, things are constrained at the moment. Everybody around the world can't do every green project that they want to do. And definitely the IRA program has, it's a big enough of a carrot that pretty much everyone wants to go play there in America instead of anywhere else. That's fine. I'm not an economist or anything like that, but my understanding was that you didn't do that sort of distorting thing to countries you had free trade agreements with. And I know that there is in a lot of the individual aspects of IRA, it is about either American made or from a fair trade agreement country. So I think overall for a country like Australia, it's good for us because all of a sudden our, battery minerals and, a bunch of other stuff like that becomes a lot more valuable. There is, something to say you should pay more for these Australian minerals than for Chinese ones. But it's no surprise that you're going to piss off the countries that have companies moving from their country to the US because of this bill. I mean, yeah, it's cause and effect.
Emmanuel Macron, president of France, had some words about this. He is saying that the IRA bill could fragment the West because of the pull of green investment dollars going to the United States. Like you said, there's definitely a carrot in the United States at the moment, and there's only so many manufacturers of wind equipment and solar equipment. They can't produce for the entire world at the moment. So it's going to pull resources to the United States where France and Germany and Denmark and all those countries are wanting to do their own thing, but they're going to have a hard time competing when it's just more profitable to be in the United States. And you see that happening at the moment. And evidently the administration of the United States does not care. It's just a mystery to me as to why we are doing this. When I say we, I mean, I guess I'm representing America in this podcast at the moment. But in other areas, Rosemary, we don't do this. The United States, Australia, and the UK are working together on a nuclear submarine. That was just announced. The president of the United States was just there with the leaders of those two countries and saying, hey, we have an agreement to go off and make these nuclear subs. Great. If we're able to make nuclear subs together, then why are we not able to work together to get the green energy business running at max capacity? It just doesn't happen. And why is America not be a leader in that? Instead of just sucking it all to America, why are we not saying, hey, we can stand up a lot of different places in the world, and we need to? If clean energy is such a catastrophic, the lack of clean energy is such a catastrophic failure for the world, which is what the administration would say, then why are you not standing up, Germany, France?
I've been a bit surprised by how aggressive it is. And also it's a little bit funny because, I mean, like we were saying a minute ago, the US is not actually renewable energy leaders. All the good know-how and technology is actually in Europe. So they've kind of, I don't know, in America, they've incentivized all that know-how to come over, I guess, but in quite an aggressive way. Definitely creates some distortion, and probably, if you're thinking globally, I don't know if it will be a force for good or bad overall, because certainly it is really nice to have such a incentive for renewable investments. So that's good. One thing that I worry about more than that, though, with the IRA is how it's got the potential to distort the technologies that are going to play out, and specifically the subsidies, the production tax credits for, or is it production, some kind of tax credit for hydrogen. Are huge. I think it's up to $3 per kilo of hydrogen tax credit, when hydrogen is supposed to, in 10 or 20 years' time, green hydrogen is supposed to get down to $1 or $2 a kilo. So it's like you'll have more tax credit than what it's actually, supposed to cost. It's like, then it will be irrelevant, the merits of hydrogen, because it will be free. So, all of our resources are going to go into making hydrogen, which is very inefficient to use hydrogen when you could use something else. And so that definitely has a potential to, put a bit of a handbrake on the energy transition as a whole, because whilst you can do nearly anything with hydrogen, you shouldn't when you can do it with direct electrification, because it's, a third of the electricity needed depending on the technology that you're talking about, half to a third of the electricity, or sometimes even worse. That to me is, at least as concerning as these, inter-country tiffs that are going on.
Yeah, well, that explains why BP is interested in green hydrogen, right? Because there's an incentive to do it. So it does skew the marketplace. And if America's basically saying, oh, it's not going to skew the marketplace, it already is skewing the marketplace. It's been like 6 months since it's been passed. It's obvious it's skewing the marketplace. And is it skewing the marketplace in a good direction? I think at the moment, if you're outside the United States, the answer is no. It's not doing that. It's actually making things a lot worse in places where need to be working hard on getting more solar and wind going. Edge Solutions, which is a company based in Scotland, and they make leading edge protection, and a new style of leading edge protection, has just completed the second installation of its protection systems at the Riffgat Offshore Wind Farm in Germany. And I'm sure I have mispronounced that. So Riffgat has a fleet of 30 Siemens 3.6 120 machines, 15 kilometers off the island of Borkum, and it was commissioned in 2014. So those wind turbines, I'm sure, are in need of some leading edge protection. And if you haven't followed Edge Solutions, you can look them up on Google. They're bringing a little bit of different technology into the leading edge protection market. They developed a thermoplastic material with a thermoplastic company. So it's called the RAN SC, and it's specifically designed for wind turbine blades. So they are putting on what I guess in the industry we call shells. They sound like hard pieces that are fit formed to the leading edge and are glued on. And I've heard good things about this at the American Clean Power Conference down in Orlando. There was a couple of people were talking to me about this material and how well that it works. Now, ORE Catapult did a study back in 2022 on these leading edge shells, and they said that the operational lifetime was going to be in excess of 50 years. So that's a long time for a leading edge protection system to work. And it's coming out of, obviously it's coming out of Scotland, not a place you would normally assume as being a wind turbine mecca, but there are a lot of wind turbines off the coast of Scotland. And where there's a problem, there's a solution. So there's a lot of wind turbines up there that are sitting in the water getting beat up pretty bad. So Armour Edge from the Edge Solutions is really interesting concept, and not even a concept, but an interesting product. And I think you're going to start seeing it in more places. It says they've taken some orders or shipping some orders to wind farms in the UK, US, and India, and rolling out training for technicians, which is probably the biggest hurdle. One of the things, Rosemary, one of the things we hear about on these leading edge shells, and Polytech makes one, I think Siemens has their own, and then Edge Solutions has this Armour Edge piece, is the training. If you don't get them installed properly, they can pop off, which is a problem. So training is probably the right way to go. And the other little piece about this is that they're making them in shorter sections. It looks like they're making them in 1 meter long pieces. So you're sticking on 1 meter at a time. If you got to do 30 meters of blade, it's going to be there a while. But it's an interesting concept that when I've looked into the technical aspects of it, it does make sense. I haven't tried this material. I'm interested in trying this material. We do some rain erosion testing here at WeatherGuard. But Rosemary, you know a lot about leading edge erosion and how treacherous that problem is. Is this one of the, maybe a new solution, a thermoplastic solution? Because everything else we've seen has been sort of polyurethane based.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, I think it makes sense that it would, come out of Scotland, because they do have a lot of wind and they have really excellent conditions for accelerating leading edge erosion. With leading edge erosion, there's kind of like two paths that technologies are going down. It's path of the solid component that is manufactured to the precise geometry of the blade that you're putting it on, which is what these guys are doing. And solid has the benefit of, lasting for a long time, but then it has the downsides of, like it's a lot more complicated to make every 1 meter section needs to be made to the right geometry. You're not just making, like a bucket of paint that can go anywhere, and you just make that exact same product over and over again. You've got to make, like 30 different pieces for every different kind of blade type that you're going to go on. It's complicated, and the logistics are a bit tricky. And then, as you said, the training and installation is critical, and a pain compared to something that you can just paint on. But you're hoping that that's all worthwhile because it lasts so much longer than a paint can. And then the other direction that we see people going is kind of, like totally away from that, and having a material that, ideally it would also last, but more focus on it being really easy to install, so that hopefully you can get a drone doing it, and then it's not such a big deal, even if it had to be reapplied every couple of years or even every year. If you can automate it with just a drone, then it's not such a big deal. So I wonder if there's space for both of those technologies in the market, or if we're going to see one or the other win out. But yeah, definitely this product, they have the recent rollout where they've installed it on a large wind farm. That's good proof of concept for the installation method. But they have also got some that have been on wind turbine blades for the last, 2014 they were installed. So that's like 9 years. So that that's a decent chunk of time. If it's if it was an area that was affected by pretty rapid leading edge erosion, then 9 years is definitely long enough to, prove that it's going to be durable. So they've kind of taken care of both of the big risks, I guess, that they would be immediately obvious with their product. So let's see where it goes from here. And I think we'll just have to wait and see how things play out, because it will depend, one, on how durable new materials prove to be and how quickly the drone technology advances. Because, at the moment, it's still pretty early days for, like, drone inspections are going really, really well. But for drones that actually need to, grab onto the blade and crawl up and down it like a crab, doing things along the way, they exist, but I don't think that it's quite as robust as, drone inspections, but I would anticipate that they would get very good at that. So, maybe in 20 years, that'll be how everything's just done with, drone crab robot things crawling all over the wind turbines to do everything.
Yeah, well, Bladebug has made a number of improvements in their crawling robot, and they just got through a trial down in France, I believe, and that went extremely well. So the crawling robot is coming very quickly, and you're starting to see more of them pop up. Now, the edge solution piece makes sense to me. We need more ideas out there because there isn't one solution for the world at the moment. And I doubt that there will ever be. Everybody's got their own problem, right? So you got to find a solution for the problem you have in front of you. But I would be interested in having edge solutions on the podcast because I want to hear more about this material, kind of how it's installed and where they're trying to go with it. Because there's a lot of wind turbines in the United States that have horrible leading edge problems, and getting a quick solution that's going to last as long as the blade lasts would make a lot of sense to a lot of operators. Hey, Uptime listeners. We know how difficult it is to keep track of the wind industry. That's why we read PES Wind magazine. PES Wind doesn't summarize the news. It digs into the tough issues, and PES Wind is written by the experts, so you can get the in-depth info you need. Check out the wind industry's leading trade publication, PES Wind, at peswind.com. So Siemens Gamesa down in Kansas is getting ready to open up their nacelle plant. Now, you remember about a year or so ago, they put that same plant in Hutchinson, Kansas in mothballs, called it hibernation. But company spokesman Andrew Luther says the facility is ramping back up for production, and that's good. Hiring production will be done in phases as required by the manufacturing process. That's a sort of a non-denial about how fast they're going to ramp up. But the company, well, obviously, which manufactures a whole bunch of components in the United States, is starting to pull things out of hibernation and get rolling again. So it looks like they're going to try to have initial production begin sometime before July of this year. And they're calling back the workers that were laid off, and they probably can't get back to the same staff they had pre-hibernation. But I think they had about 100 employees there. So a number are going to be back. I know the labor market in Kansas is getting really tight also, so they may have a hard time getting some of those employees back. But at least there's some activity. In contrast, the IRA bill has been playing into a lot of decisions in terms of the wind turbine companies. The Siemens Gamesa plant opens up again in Kansas, and I was noticing in an article from Brazil that Siemens Gamesa is actually going to close one of the plants in Brazil. And obviously the thought occurred, they're not directly related, but they're kind of related, that the Siemens Gamesa is going to go where the money is and where the carrots are, as Rosemary puts it. And that probably the IRA bill has a lot to do with that. In fact, the article, it was written in Portuguese, so I had to translate it. But it sounded like a lot of the wind turbine manufacturers are going to be shipping components into Brazil instead of making them in country, which is very odd, I think.
Yeah, obviously there's some sort of price difference in the cost of labor between the two countries. So the IRA carrot is large enough to make up for that. I wonder if Siemens Gamesa had an inkling that this was coming, and that's why they only mothballed their factory rather than closing it, or if it was more just the general awareness that there was a big potential pipeline in the US that they would definitely want to be a part of if it eventuated.
It's probably true. I think that COVID was a big part of it for sure. But also, when they changed administration in the United States, you had to figure there's a lot of noise since 2020 that there was going to be a bill like the IRA bill. So if you're a Siemens Gamesa or an LM Wind Power, or pick them, it would be in your best interest to just kind of hold off as long as you can on actually closing a facility. And they did. It looks like most of them did. So there's another plant opening that was announced this week, Arcosa, who manufactures the wind turbine towers. Now, I don't know much about this company, so when I started digging into it, it's like, wow, they actually make a lot of wind turbine towers. They're going to open a new plant down in New Mexico. So Arcosa announced that it had received tower orders of approximately $750 million for delivery beginning in 2024 and continuing through 2028. That's a nice little run. The majority of the orders will be down in sort of the Texas, New Mexico, Colorado region, from what it sounds like, maybe even in Arizona. And as part of this, they're going to open a new plant in Belen, New Mexico, which is close to Albuquerque, New Mexico, if you've ever been to Albuquerque. The $750 million in new orders are expected to be eligible for the Advanced Manufacturing Production Tax Credit included in the IRA bill. And Arcosa plans to invest about $60 million to purchase property, modify an existing plant, and get the necessary equipment in the facility to start making these towers. That's a big deal. If you're in the town of Allen, New Mexico, that is a big deal. And you're going to start seeing more and more of this. I think the IRA bill is bringing more American manufacturing online. And it doesn't say, Rosemary, who these towers are going to. You know, we just talked about Keystone and the spiral towers getting connected with GE. Is Arcosa tied to Siemens Gamesa? I couldn't tell. Do you happen to know who they're tied to in terms, or maybe they make towers for everybody?
Yeah, I don't know, but I assume they make them for everyone. I'm just on their website now, and it says that since 2000, they've delivered 12,000 towers for installations in a multitude of wind farms across the United States. It seems too big to be tied to just one. It's a lot of towers. It's just the normal kind of tower that we're all used to seeing. It's nothing crazy. It's a technology that people are already making around the world, and now there's a big incentive to make them all in the US. So that's what's happening. You definitely couldn't say that IRA isn't doing what they intended it to do.
Well, they have another factory. I was looking online. I think they had a factory in Iowa that they slowed down recently because of COVID and not having any tax investment into renewable energy. That really put a damper on the American market. But opening up in sort of the New Mexico area is interesting because that's kind of where Keystone is, right? So if you start thinking about where these plants are being located, where do you think the future of onshore wind's going to be? It's going to be sort of Texas, Colorado, New Mexico, Kansas, Oklahoma region, it looks like, maybe into Arizona, not in necessarily, because there's already plants there, I guess, but I mean, it's not going to be necessarily in Iowa or Illinois or Indiana. Maybe there's saturated marketplaces and all the movement's going to be down south. That's what it looks like just based on factories.
Yep. Will be interesting to see where it goes.
Rosemary, we haven't talked about the DroneBase Series E funding round, and it happened a couple of weeks ago, and it's just been in the back of my head to talk about it. But they closed $55 million of a Series E to expand its inspection analytic services for energy assets. And as part of DroneBase now, it renamed itself into Zeitview. And they are really becoming a huge inspection company, not in just drones. Obviously, that's why they changed the name, but they're doing airborne measurements and view overflying solar farms and looking at all kinds of different applications for the technology that they have. So they're more than just a drone company. So that makes sense, right? And Zeitview obviously means in German time view, which again, maybe not necessarily easy for the American market, but hey, they had a whole bunch of investors, Union Square Ventures, Upfront Ventures, Euclidean Capital, Energy Transition Ventures, and Hearst Ventures all participated in that Series E funding round. Zeitview last year inspected about 43 gigawatts of solar. That's roughly 30% of the total U.S. solar capacity. So they're a huge player in that market. And I with this funding, it's just going to propel them. It has to. And congratulations to Zeitview, formerly DroneBase. If you looked on their LinkedIn page, everybody's LinkedIn that worked at DroneBase, it says Zeitview, formerly DroneBase, because everybody's still kind of getting used to the name. It's actually a pretty smart idea to do that on LinkedIn, so everybody remembers to call it Zeitview from here on out. But congratulations, everybody there. That's really exciting, and we're looking forward from more from Zeitview. Our wind farm of the week is Sweetland Wind Farm in South Dakota. Sweetland Wind Farm is being built by Scout Clean Energy in sort of central South Dakota. Scout Clean Energy is a portfolio company of Brookfield Renewable. And at Sweetland, they just received 71 2.8 megawatt 127 wind turbines from GE. So there's a big yard out there full of wind turbine parts. The site will be commissioned later this year and expected to power 82,000 homes. And Sweetland is expected to support about 200 temporary construction jobs and 10 permanent full-time positions once everything goes into operation. So congratulations to Sweetland Wind Farm in South Dakota. You are our wind farm of the week. That's going to do it for this week's Uptime Wind Energy podcast. Thanks for listening. Please give us a 5-star rating on your podcast platform and subscribe in the show notes below to Uptime Tech News, our weekly newsletter. And check out Rosemary's YouTube channel, Engineering with Rosie. And we'll see you here next week on the Uptime Wind Energy podcast.